Welcome to the first part of ISA's three-part video series on the Kisan protests in India. The Kisan protests began across North India late last year in response to three farm bills that were passed by the Indian government in September of 2020. Since then, farmer unions and various representatives have demanded that the laws be repealed. The protests have expanded across the globe in various South Asian communities. ISA Human believes it is important to understand the situation through an educational lens and support the communities that are affected.
Our first speaker in this three-part series is Dr. Sejuti Das Gupta. Dr. Das Gupta from Michigan State University completed her doctoral studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies. She is a published author, has written various papers, and a book named Class, Politics, and Agrarian Policies in Post-Liberalisation India. Her areas of interest include capitalism, colonialism, agrarian political economy, public policy, class, caste, and state-society interactions. Trained in political science, she shifted to development studies to do interdisciplinary research.
Right after her PhD, she served under the Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellow Scheme. Today, Dr. Dasgupta will be speaking about the specific farm bills and the reason behind the farmers' protests in India. Please welcome Dr. Sejuti Das Gupta.
So when you think of the word farmer, I think the first image that comes in our head, or Kisan, the first image we have in our head is someone who's wearing a dhoti, which is a traditional outfit, working in the scorching sun, often looking quite poor and tattered and harassed and overworked. And if you look at any imagery of Kisan, that is the kind of imagery that we carry. But I would be, happy to inform you that India has made a lot of progress. And it's not like all farmers are living that life. There is what we call in political economy or agrarian political economy, a class of farmers who have done distinctly better. And they drive very fancy cars. They own houses in cities. Their children look like any other urban child who has a Nike or Adidas clothes on them. They aspire for a life in Delhi and Hyderabad. And therefore, when we use a word like farmer, we really need to qualify who are we referring to. Because while 85 or recent data shows a little over 86% of Indian farmers are still small and marginal, which means a very small piece of land, something about 2 hectares or less. If you go down south in Kerala, that can even be a 0.5 acre of land, so a really small piece of land. If you compare it to the US, to Michigan, a small farmer would own about 100 to 120 acres of land. So that's the kind of difference we are thinking about. They are basically asking for a kind of minimum support price. The minimum support price is that if we are producing certain crops, even if it is a bad year, and for some reason the prices crash in the market, the farmers who have invested to the last penny and often have also gone into taking a huge debt to produce that food should be able to at least recover. So the minimum support price is something that is calculated on the basis of the cost of cultivation. And that is something that the government assures you that you are going to get it, even if the market is volatile and the prices drop. The second thing that the government decides to do, and the farmers are also asking for it, is a second safety valve, which is food availability. And food availability is something that is very important, because if you remember, India emerges from multiple famines, which it becomes an independent sovereign nation state. And one of the big promises of independent India is that we will not have a famine again. And how do you ensure that people will not go hungry and people will not die? I mean, the 1942-43 famine in Bengal had 3 million people die in just that one famine and the diseases that followed. So therefore, the government says that we are going to buy some of the main grains from the farmers And we are going to channelize that through the Food Corporation of India into what they call providing food through the ration cards. And this is also a very subsidized availability of food, but it is to ensure that there is some kind of food availability for the poorest of poor in the society, both in rural and urban India. The third safety valve that they are asking for is some kind of subsidy in the cost or the inputs of production. For instance, a subsidy on seeds, subsidy on water, and subsidy on power. Like I told you, irrigation is a very big part of being able to grow crops. And therefore, the subsidy on the irrigation and power is a very important part of farmer demands. And these are all safety walls which the government kind of recognizes, and what it brings about are price policy and marketing policies, among several others that are put in place, so that this important component of India's population, who at this point might be about 57 or 58% of India's population, but in 80s they are more than 65% of India's population. So it's a major, for a democracy, it's also that you're promising this to the major or the numerically the bigger part of your country, also those who feed the country. And therefore the safety walls are to make that kind of transition gradually into large scale food sufficient agriculture, but also protecting the interest of food and some kind of a price guarantee for those who are going to grow that food. So the transition, if you think about, is the current policies, and the current policies are where we are seeing almost a complete disregard for these safety walls which were put in place. So currently the three policies with the three laws which have been passed, it was passed in September 2020, and the government is basically saying that these are not required anymore. The language that the government has adopted is of more freedom, game changer, but these are, while this might be something that's that might be a game changer for a very small class of farmers, it is very evident from the number of farmers who are protesting that that isn't the case for the majority, or almost a large part of the farmers are negatively impacted. I would look at the computer to at least tell you the names of the three laws, because they are longish names. The Farmers Trade, Produce and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020, that's the first one. The second one is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act 2020. And the third is the Essential Commodities Amendment Act 2020. So like I just told you, these components that were put in place, which is price policy and procurement and marketing policy, all of these three are now under attack. So let's break that a little bit more to understand what's going on. One of the big things of where will the farmers sell their products, and how will it be, how will they get a decent price for their product? And this was one of the main demands, again, in the struggle in 80s. And what comes out as a result of that is this institution called APMC, which is basically the agricultural producers are bought and sold in these mandis or these markets. These are regulated bodies. The governments regulate them. I have myself been to several of them, including one which exclusively trades in silk and in Karnataka. So like I told you, the entire point is to protect the farmers from the price volatility, to ensure that they have a decent price when they're selling the product. They also, when you are going to a specified place and all the villagers are going there, it also means sharing the cost of transport, which is a big cost when it comes to selling your produce. Because if you think about a farmer who has a 2-acre or 3-acre piece of land, what they are producing is not huge in terms of quantity. But it's very hard for them, therefore, to be able to transport that from their village to the city. But if like a number of their villagers are coming from the same rural village into a city mandi, then they can do the transport also on sharing basis. And this is something that we should also note that agriculture in India is a state subject. So when you look at the policies regarding agriculture per se, they are meant to be regulated, built, and ratified and amended by the respective states. And the reason for that is that India is extremely heterogeneous in terms of the availability of water, in terms of the kinds of crops that they produce, in terms of the landholding sizes, the geographical, the political, and the social conditions are very, very varied. So that is one of the reasons why agriculture was made into a state subject. But so one of the big reasons why there has been so much protest is that when the bill was brought in the parliament, there wasn't really any consultation with the farmer organizations. There was also not much consultation with the state governments. And interestingly, this is the first time that there are such big changes in the agrarian laws without consulting or without being asked by the farmer organizations. Like I told you, in 70s, when we are seeing the price policy and minimum support price coming, it's all really a reaction to the farmer protest. But now we are seeing the government taking the first step with almost a disregard for what the farmers are asking for. The second is the issue of procurement of rice and wheat, which has been feeding in a big way into the public distribution system. And there we should be aware that India has done really badly on the food insecurity index. The global hunger index, which comes out every 5 or 6 years, it's showing that India's 2020 report, it is on the 94th position of 107 countries, which means that India is facing unprecedented levels of malnutrition, child unavailability of food. Women are really suffering. There are certain rural pockets, in especially where the indigenous populations are concentrated and the Dalit populations are concentrated, where you can see very high incidence of malnutrition and food insecurity. So under this kind of a scenario, to say that we are going to dismantle the the public distribution system and not going to buy, so that farmers have the liberty to choose to where they can sell their product, would also really hurt us as consumers of food, which is, a huge population of India who still depend on the PDS. So that's the second thing to think about. So the mandis, and the third is the minimum support price. The minimum support price, for all practical purposes, is really as much as a farmer can get when they go into the markets. Unfortunately, the government said it would be the minimum, it would be the floor of the prices they would get, but they can go all the way as high as the market can go. But the way the market treats them, given the terrible inequality in terms of information, in terms of transport, in terms of infrastructure, what happens is that when they eventually come to sell, that becomes the maximum that any trader or any buyer would give them. So if you take away that minimum support price, it would mean that farmers are really at the mercy of the buyers and the traders to sell their produce. And that would also potentially really hurt them if they don't have some kind of a chance to bargain. And I really worry that, this kind of treating Kisans as individuals, right? The idea of individuals is that we are all as if standing on a level playing ground, and all of us can therefore compete against one another. That's the logic of a market. But that's not true about Indian agriculture, right? Indian agriculture is standing on a very deep structural inequality, where there are more than the majority of farmers are at a structurally very disadvantaged position. So from there to say that now all of you are free to run this race might mean that those who are really disadvantaged have to run with those who are really advantaged, and it would be a very unfair race at the very least. So the struggle really starts from November, the third week of November, but it kind of takes a very bad turn in January. And I'm sure many of you have read about how there was one violent incident, and it was, of course, something that was very big, highlighted in a very big way. But unfortunately, that has been used as a way to not take the negotiations very far after that by the government. The other important thing for the farmer union, I don't know if you've noticed, but originally it looked like there was a wide participation from male members. But in the last 1 month, the reports that have been coming out show a wider participation also by women. And that also shows that the Kisans are not discouraged. If anything, they are more sure and more committed that this is something that they want to do. I've heard multiple women speak about their commitment to this, and from being really there in the protest for cooking and helping out their male counterparts, now they are also speaking out and speaking aloud against the government and the policies. So it shows that there is a strength in the movement, which is very welcome. Sure. So intersectionality, for those of us who are not social sciences, is a theorization which talks about how multiple identities make us more precarious than the others. And at the same time, for instance, in my situation, my Asian identity, my women identity, my identity as an immigrant can be, all of these could be acting and contributing towards what I am experiencing in the social domain. And that can actually layer the kind of power dynamics that I am experiencing. So, to start with, what is intersectionality? But in the context of Kisans, like I said, India is a very heterogeneous country. And when you think about the Kisans, of course, they are those who are, for whom agriculture is a question of livelihood. But when you think about the Kisans, there is a huge variety. I would say, of course, caste plays a big role. And there, I would say there's a big divide and a big variety across castes. So for instance, Chhattisgarh, a state that I have worked in and have done my fieldwork for PhD, I have seen that in Chhattisgarh, if you look at the OBC caste, and which consists of the Sahus and the Chandrakars, they have done much better in the after the state was formed, in comparison to the SCs, which the scheduled caste, which is another name for the Dalit farmers. They've also done much better than the indigenous farmers. And in Chhattisgarh, there is a huge part of the population who are actually tribals or indigenous. So if you look at within the farming community, there has been a big divide or a lot of hierarchy in terms of your starting position in the structures, and then how that has benefited you in terms of accessing and utilizing the agrarian policies during the post-liberalization era. And therefore, currently, the variety of income that we are talking about, there are farmers who make, they can't even cover the cost of production. They have a lot of debt. And they really struggle in terms of acquiring the basic inputs of production. They live in Chhattisgarh, especially the indigenous population. Many of them live in very distant places from where the nearest shop where you can buy seeds or fertilizers are very far. So their cost of transport is very high. Many of them are also very illiterate. So among these SC and ST farmers, they really struggle to navigate even the basic paperwork of Narega or a bank document, because they are not able to process them by themselves. So against them, if you think about a farmer from an OBC community in Chhattisgarh who is at least finished high school, if not a college, many of them have family members who work in urban centers. Many of them speak Hindi. Few of them also speak English. Their pieces of land are much closer to the highways. So their transport is not that big an issue. They also have a much wider availability of irrigation. They also have, you know, much bigger pieces of land. So in terms of their land holding, many of them have 8 to 10 acres of land, whereas the SC farmers have 4 acres or 5 acres of land. So, these are factors which are very, very critical when you think about the effect of a policy like this. Because like I was telling you, that for a small farmer, when they have to go into a city to sell their products, just the cost of transport can be such an obstacle that they can never make it to the city, and therefore they have to sell it at a much depressed price to either a trader in nearby, or to a bigger farmer who can take it into the city, or to the trader from whom they have taken a loan. Vis-a-vis a Sahu or a Chandrakar farmer who has a much bigger piece of land, anyway lives very close to the highway, has all these connections to urban centers, so can very well get the kind of information about where they can sell their produce for a higher price. So therefore, this kind of structural inequality, which is built within the agrarian economy, means that the shift in the policies, whether it's minimum support price, or the gradual doing away with the mandis, or less support in terms of subsidies, and less support in terms of public distribution, all of this is going to hurt the lower caste and the lower class farmers in much more precarious ways than those who have either multiple sources of income, or have better information, or have a better socio-economic position in terms of either caste or class, or both. The other thing to consider in this is, the story that I started telling you. When you think of a farmer, you almost always think of a man who's standing in the sun. Unfortunately, that is the imagery that we carry, but a lot of the farmers in India are actually women. And agriculture all across the world, both Africa, Asia, has been going through a phase of feminization of agriculture, where women have been taking more and more responsibility of agrarian production, as men have been, or have, because of the push factor and the lack of good lucrative income coming out of agriculture, they have been pushed to work in more urban centers, and that vacuum has been filled by the women. It doesn't mean that the women have been absolved of the responsibility of taking care of elders and children and cooking and getting water, etc. They have only added the work of also taking care of agriculture. But that said, there are very few places where you actually see a change in terms of land ownership in name of women, which means that whether it is going to a formal source for taking loans, or it is going to a cooperative society for taking subsidized fertilizers or seeds, women do not qualify to do any of this. And therefore, it has been, or on top of that, if we take away the other protective policies, or the safety walls in some sense, which have been upholding the interests of the Kisans, it is bound to affect the women further. Instead of empowering the women and giving them the institutional recognition of being a farmer and a landowner, we are actually pushing them further down the ladder by taking away the safety walls, which is very unfortunate at this moment. For someone who works and reads and thinks of agriculture very seriously, I think it is one subject that is about the livelihood of the majority of Indians. It is about the environment and the ecology. So it's about water and land. It is about food security of the country, which has very serious ramifications for urban population also. And it is also 60%. So for the largest democracy of the world, it is the majority of also your citizens. So I think when you think about agriculture, for many of us who live in urban spaces and aspire to work in industries and services, it looks irrelevant. But I want to remind all of us that it's actually a question of food, of environment, of ecology, of livelihood and democracy that is hidden in the story of agrarian policies in India.